If you think you're enlightened, go spend Christmas with your family, said Ram Dass. Why? Because unconscious behavior is like the final boss of awakening, the seemingly most challenging part. Even the most revered teachers and sages and gurus can seem to struggle behind closed doors. I mean, sure, your thoughts, feelings, and entire personality may have radically shifted since seeing deeper truths about reality. But how are you acting in your work, in your business, your relationships? If everything is peace and love and oneness, are you really embodying it? These are the questions that pop up in the minds of those on the pathless path to the peace that passeth all understanding. And so in this video, we'll talk about what unconscious behavior is, the exact mechanism behind it, and so you can begin to overcome it and inject flow and harmony into all your day-to-day activities, radically transforming your entire life. And the reason I'm so confident in this approach presented in this video is that rather than claiming I'm some kind of perfect embodiment, instead referring to the night and day shifts that I and many others I've worked with have made on this pathless path of awakening and releasing. Because I've seen that all of these unconscious behaviors aren't just random, they follow predictable patterns and have a predictable cause. Once you see it, you stop treating it like a moral failure and more of a wonderful opportunity to release all the lifelong limitations that have been holding you down. So let's look in detail at what it is. Unconscious behavior is, well, unconscious, i.e., you don't fully know you're doing it, or at least you're not fully aware of the consequences. You're asleep. And many of you might feel like you've become possessed, like despite your best intentions to show up in peace and love, at some point in life, there always seems to be a trigger that arises and it turns into a strong feeling. And the next thing you know, you're off on one, only to wake back up an hour or two later and think, what the hell have I done? This doesn't revoke responsibility or mean you can't catch it before it happens or wake up at any moment, but it does explain why the pattern seems so pernicious. The thing is, you can't fully know what you're doing at the time because if you did, you wouldn't do it. So there's a mechanism within consciousness to hide itself from itself, to believe itself as a limited and separate entity needing to defend a small me. This comes from our conditioning, whether old emotional wounds, childhood traumas, or suppressed feelings handed down through millions of years of generations. Essentially, it's built on survival as a body and mind, showing up as these patterns that don't seem to reflect the peace and love of our true nature. And this is why we feel in these moments that we're not really being our true, authentic self. Our true self is already infinite, imperturbable, immortal, undisturbable, unshakable, unstainable. But even if we feel like we know this on a deep level, contracted feelings can still exist in the body-mind system that get triggered and drive all kinds of action on autopilot, like limiting programs overriding your true authentic expression. Now it might be showing up as conflict in relationship or with family, doom scrolling for 4 hours in the middle of the night, or impulsive aggression or avoidance in response to a situation. I'm sure I don't need to give too many examples for you to imagine how extreme and consequential unconscious behavior can become sometimes for some of us. So, what's the mechanism of these patterns of unconscious behavior so we can start to understand what's going on and therefore how to dissolve it? As we mentioned, unconscious behavior is driven by any remaining contracted and unloving feelings in the body-mind system. Fear, apathy, anger, upset, rage. These feelings arise as somatic sensations, as in actually physically felt feelings in the body, along with muscle contraction and sympathetic nervous system reaction. And these feelings may also be seemingly triggered by something. Perhaps something your partner or friend says, or perhaps when engaging in certain business activities or at certain times of day. The feelings drive the thinking. So, when a particular feeling is present, thoughts that correspond with that appear in the mind in this awareness. Perhaps urges to say or do a particular thing, like, how dare he say that? I ought to give him a piece of my mind. Or an urge to lash out or run away, when the better idea is to obviously engage with calmness and compassion. And these feelings and thoughts themselves aren't the problem, but the thinking, when identified with, turns into behavior. And the level of temptation to identify with the thinking seems to be in tandem with the level of intensity of the feeling. The stronger the feeling, the more the thought seems to be screaming, listen to me, I am relevant, I am so important. Although, truly, the thoughts and feelings have no power over you, and you are always ultimately consenting to identification. It may feel very uncomfortable, sometimes even painful, but when we can sit with that pain, we alchemize it into gold rather than spit it out as poison. So you could say that there are two places that unconscious behavior can be broken. One is at the identification level. There may be thoughts and feelings present, but can you zoom out from the thinking and instead rest as open awareness? Thoughts appear in awareness, but you don't have to zoom your attention down onto them and take yourself to be the one in that story, in that podcast. Instead, you can rest perceptually open and notice the thoughts as simply thoughts appearing in this awareness, and watch them appear and disappear without a trace, without resistance, without identification. The way from unconscious to conscious behavior isn't like an on and off switch necessarily. It's a spectrum. Even just taking the thoughts a little less seriously might mean that you still play out that story. Perhaps there's still a bit of conflict going on between you and someone. You're still butting heads a little, but the story is a little softer. Resolution and mutual understanding come sooner, even if you still have a few things play out amongst yourself in not the most ideal way. Every softening is a step in the right direction. The second place to break unconscious behavior is at the feeling level. Like we mentioned, feelings are driving the thoughts, which, when identified with, drive the behavior. And so logic follows that if we are to remove the feeling, we're ripping out the primary driver of unconscious behavior. We're ripping out unconscious behavior from its root. Without the contracted, uncomfortable feeling arising to begin with, we're not as tempted to play out the program, and we are instead resting as the peace of being. Because the truth is, whether it's released at the identification level or the feeling level, really they're the same thing, and one undoes the other. Release the feeling, and you release the identification with that story. And without identification, you're just left to sit with the feeling, allowing it to process, resolve, and release automatically. So, how do we release the feelings? Well, I've made many videos on releasing feelings like fear and other feelings. So, you can search my channel for things like how to release fear, and all the resources will appear for you so you can go deep and go all the way with releasing. But the basic foundation is to zoom out from the thinking, rest perceptually as this open awareness, naturally allowing the feelings, the sensations to be welcomed in awareness without resistance so they unwind and dissolve. It was Lester Levinson that said, one release is the equivalent of months of meditation. And he was right. You can sit on a pillow for many hours, training the attention, trying to quieten the mind. But when that massive seething blob of anger and rage that you've been holding onto for 3 decades finally pops, you'll find your mind quieter than a monk that spent 3 years meditating on a mountaintop. The truth is, the only way to completely rid ourselves of unconscious behavior is to release all of the contracted, unloving feelings. And so, this is the path we're all on. So, what are some of the common traps on the pathless path of embodiment of peace, love, and harmony? The first is not taking full responsibility. We might claim that the reality of the universe is all oneness or be generally down with the concepts of non duality and awakening. But then we still think that there's a bunch of others out there not getting it or oppressing us. Now, don't get me wrong, relative oppression still exists. And in some situations, we may still need to draw a stern boundary or even remove ourselves from a situation in extreme circumstances. But it's also incredibly empowering to know that we have the ultimate role to play, because it's easy to blame the other, but situations tend to be a reflection of something going on inside us. It might seem like our friend or partner is the one who's entirely wrong and that they're just being dysfunctional and that we'd never do nothing of the kind. But we've almost certainly got our version of the same going on. These cycles continue to play out because both parties are holding on to old feelings that play out as predictable programs and dramas that only ever resolve themselves when one or the other is willing to let it go and come back to the truth. So take full responsibility for your feelings and make the path releasing them. It's not that the feelings are bad, it's just that when they're stuck, they seem to block the sun like clouds in the sky. They block your authenticity with the garbage of emotional stuckness and limitation. The second trap is that it stays all conceptual. You may have read tons of spiritual books or be well versed in the YouTube algorithm from Kastrup to Spira to Parsons and audiobooks of the Bhagavad Gita and beyond, but then you're all up in concepts, never spending any time actually safely feeling your feelings. The thing is, when it comes to investigating the true nature of reality or releasing the feelings, you can't just think about it. You actually have to do it. Even though ultimately, paradoxically, it's a non doing. You've been doing the concepts for decades. Now it's time to be your beingness and feel. The third trap is only going part of the way. You may feel profoundly better after a big release, but then your attention is back out into the world again, trying to fix or trying to find peace and happiness in the world of form and experiences, only to feel slapped in the face by the universe again when a trigger ultimately flares up again and old patterns rear their ugly head again. Ultimately, we're talking about a profound peace and harmony here. One that isn't just dotted here and there through moments in your life, but sustained as an ever present background to all experience. We're talking about the answer to everything, the ultimate truth of who you are, of what is freedom. And so, why would we only want a slice of the pie if we can eat the whole thing? So let's bring this home. Unconscious behavior isn't some mysterious spiritual flaw in the core of your being. It's a predictable pattern fueled by millions of years of human conditioning. And you're going to break the generational trauma and heal all of us. Because it's a simple sequence: feeling, thought, identification, behavior. You don't have to identify with the thinking. You can release the feelings. You can rest as awareness. That's it. That's the whole game. When you break the chain, you don't just become more loving, transforming your whole reality. You get to watch the endless blossoming of embodiment, and it can be a beautiful journey. So if you want to end unconscious behavior and embody awakening on a deep level, I want to invite you to join Awake and Embodied. Over there, we have the weekly live group calls with me, the full awakening and embodiment sessions, along with a supportive community to hyper accelerate your journey. Click the link in the description for more info. See you on the inside and in the next video, of course. Peace.